Okay, let's go. Good afternoon once again. Welcome to the 8-week AI challenge. Good to have you all on board this afternoon. This afternoon session is called Making It Real. And in this particular session, we are going to essentially go through some case studies. We're going to look at some strategy, some other pieces around how we essentially put an AI strategy and AI practice together. Just before we get to that, let's just have a look at where we are. So we've been through a number of weeks, as you can imagine. We've got realistically after this one more to go. So we've looked at licensing, partner benefits. We obviously kicked off with getting started. We got a little technical for a while when we looked at becoming an AI master. We've looked at building IP, industry focus, so what you can do in terms of your own practice. We looked then at building an AI practice, so the tools, the skill sets, how you essentially stitch all the pieces together ultimately. There was a little piece around connections and online communities, so where you should go, what you should look at. And this is an important component because we'll reiterate it during the course of today. Obviously, if you are building, it's important that you stay abreast of things by checking out the communities, and go to some of the learning capabilities that we've made available, that Microsoft has made available in terms of getting your teams skilled up, or at least getting them to point at a particular piece of the AI world. This week, like I said, we'll be making it real, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Ronnie Gua, who will be taking you through the first part where he'll be exploring some of the stack, some of the case studies, and telling you about some of the partners that are already doing this locally. So Ronnie, all yours.
Thanks very much for that, Glenn, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining in on the session again. As Glenn mentioned, I'll be focused on sharing with you a whole bunch of use cases and scenarios, and almost all of them are from Australia and New Zealand, because I thought it was important to kind of showcase the fact that a lot of these technologies are already in use by customers in this region. And for those of you who've been with us for the entire journey, you might remember that in the first session I talked a lot about our vision around machine learning, advanced analytics, and artificial intelligence. And the whole concept is around empowering our users to be able to do more. And empowering humans to be able to achieve more, and using a lot of these tools as an adjunct to a lot of the capabilities and tools that are already available in the marketplace. And to that end, there's probably three parts that I wanted to focus on today. It's the machine learning component, cognitive services, and intelligent bots. I guess from a building an AI practice perspective, one of the other aspects we all have to deal with is helping our customers on this journey of taking these concepts and making it real for them. I've been talking to our customers about AI for almost a couple of years now, and I find that there is a lot of press and there's a lot of stories in the media and on LinkedIn around how AI and machine learning is transforming all these global and large companies, and how people are using it to save millions of dollars and improve their processes. What our customers struggle with is being able to make it real for themselves, is to understand how some of these could relate to their business scenarios or their business problems. And I find storytelling is a great way to help them bridge that gap. And what I do is I share a whole bunch of use cases from their industry and from other industries to get them to start thinking about how potentially the platform is already being used. And this gets our customers thinking about scenarios and use cases that might be relevant for them. So as I run through these use cases, don't think of them purely as a case study, as a validation of the technology, because that it definitely is, but also think of how you could extend on these stories with your customers, and how you could adopt them, how you could change them, and how you could make it real for your customers, whether they be in the industry that I'm talking about, or how you can extend that out into other industries as well. And that's where this whole concept of case studies and storytelling becomes really, really important in the world of AI. So as I mentioned, I'll focus on these three areas. And again, just reiterating some of the things I spoke of in our first session, machine learning. one of the, and you would have seen this through the various sessions that we've gone through, we're very focused on democratizing this whole concept of machine learning. We're supporting a whole bunch of the open source tools and capabilities throughout our stack. But also what we've done is we've developed the Azure AI Gallery, which is which includes a whole bunch of solutions and templates that our partners and customers can use to build the solutions on top of. And so this includes things like most commonly used functions like fraud detection, cluster analysis, next best offer, personalization, and so on, all the way through to just single models or single modules that you could then use and develop. So if you've got a customer scenario where you need to show churn, you can actually use one of these existing models connected to the data set and show a really quick ROI for a demo or a proof of concept to then extend that solution out with their capability, with their data set. So really keep the Azure AI Gallery in mind when you are approaching customers, when you are looking to do projects, as it will greatly reduce your time to market and in the creation of an MVP. So if I look at machine learning and probably some of the biggest examples and stories that we have developed in the last year, this was a project which related to a food franchise in Australia, and really what they wanted to do was something quite simple. Is they wanted to see if there was a correlation between the weather, the day of the week, and what people ordered. And I think at a high level we all believe that is to be the case, but they really wanted to understand what that change was, and it really allowed them to stock their stores better. So rather than stocking everything, they could then prioritize, given on what the weather is going to be, on the things that they thought they might need to sell. And based on that, they also wanted to develop a bit of an on-sell and upsell capability across the various channels. The solution was built in Azure Machine Learning, and it was combined into a web service which could then be connected to from their various apps, be it from the web, the app, or their phone ordering system. And yes, look, it did find a correlation between the weather and the temperature and what people ordered, but what we also found is that there was a correlation between the location of the store. So a hot Tuesday in Melbourne, people order very different things to a hot Tuesday in Brisbane. And being able to combine all of these things together, they are now able to provide real-time recommendations to customers through the various channels, and also extend this out through a whole bunch of other interfaces as well. Now, this is just an example of effectively finding a correlation and being able to visualize that data very easily and be able to extend that out. And it obviously, you can think of a whole bunch of other scenarios beyond just food, where taking data from one environment like weather, tying it in with your sales data, and you could have probably come up with predictions and recommendations for your customer. Another example, which is more based around universities and TAFEs, and this was actually a solution that was built by a partner of ours out of Sydney a couple of years ago, and it was done for TAFE, where they wanted to predict which students were most likely to drop out. And for a couple of reasons. One was obviously from a revenue perspective, but also being able to act on it early and to allow for remediation, which obviously has big revenue impacts, but also social impacts for people completing their courses. Based on the model that they used, they visualized it through Power BI, and it was actually, they had it to a 92% accuracy rate to predict the propensity of somebody to drop out. It used demographic information as well as course information, historical results, and so on. And this is a great example of effectively what we're doing is, based on a person's information, we're able to make a prediction on what action they might be taking 3 or 6 months later, based on the vast repository of data that the TAFE or the universities have. You can very easily see how this could be extended with, for example, telcos looking at customers who might want to drop out of their plan and move to a competitor, or for banks who might potentially default on their loan. You've got access, or the institutions have access to all of this data, and it's really using a propensity model to be able to predict an action they might have. Again, as you would have learned throughout the course, if we start off with a 92% accuracy rate, it can only get better from there on as there is more data being used, as it's more refined further on. And this is a great example of a very quick ROI, but then also being able to extend it out very extensively. And the third example I wanted to use was a bit of work that we did with one of the government agencies in Canberra, where they wanted to be able to find a correlation between jobs and programs, courses and programs, and the effect it had on job seekers. In this case, it was specifically around Indigenous job seekers, and they wanted to have a recommendations engine whereby when a new job seeker came in to the department, they could then predict or recommend the course of the program that would have the biggest impact on them finding work in the shortest period of time. We had a whole bunch of the data available, built a model based on Azure Machine Learning with a whole bunch of code in R, and we developed a recommendations engine which was actually embedded through Excel, because that's what their field staff use. So as they put in the details of a new job seeker, it would come back and recommend various different courses that would have a positive impact on them finding new work. What we also found is that building these models gave them a whole bunch of new insight into their historical data as well that they previously didn't have. So some programs that they thought were highly successful, once we built a cluster model, we found it was only successful for certain groups of individuals rather than overall. So again, this is an example of finding an alignment or a correlation between data that you have and a positive impact or an impact that it might have on your customer base. Again, can be expanded out to a whole bunch of different scenarios as well. So that was around machine learning. We've talked a lot around cognitive services and the availability of a whole bunch of these services through APIs. Now, the cognitive services are a really powerful way of making your solution, your application, very user-friendly, very user-interactive, and very proactive in the way people can interact with it. You would have seen from Microsoft a whole bunch of case studies and scenarios around vision through the Seeing AI app, our translator application that's available on various devices, speech recognition, search capabilities, and so on. One of the great powers of the cognitive services APIs is because they're REST APIs, you can string a whole bunch of them together to build a highly complex and innovative solution. And I want to share with you a couple of them that we've implemented recently. The first one is a project that was done by a partner of ours, and it was a very short time to market, and the challenge really was a customer had hundreds of thousands of documents in various different formats, and they wanted to have some sort of what they call contextual searching on top of it. So rather than just searching for the text that somebody's put into the search box, to be able to understand the intent of the search and then be able to find documents that might be related to it. So this used a whole bunch of the Azure search services as well as the Bing search services within the Cognitive Services API around content exploration, knowledge exploration, and so on. And it read through the content, found the relationship between the various documents, the various keywords, created its own taxonomy. And then when somebody did a search, it would actually break the search terms down and try and understand the intent of the search and find relevant content. So as you can find an example here, where I talk about reduction of methane emissions in Victoria. So rather than just looking for any or all of those terms appearing in the documents, what this basically does is it breaks it down to look for methane emissions, how to reduce it in a particular location, which is a very, very different search. Now, once it's been developed and they've got the API or the solution available, it can actually be extended out using other cognitive services as well. So in this use case, you could have it on your phone, and somebody could, for example, take a photo of something, say crop in Dubbo, and it could then trigger a search by doing image analysis to say, okay, that's wheat in Dubbo, it looks dry, and I trigger off a search on what do I do with dry wheat in Dubbo. So the way you can start tying all of these cognitive services together can end up developing a highly innovative and complex solution with very minimal development work. There's an example with a energy retailer who managed all the power lines. What they used to do was send engineers out on the field to evaluate the infrastructure to see if there were parts that were deteriorating or if there were too much growth of trees around the power poles, and so on. They wanted to see if they could use some of our machine learning and image analytics to ease this process. What we did as part of the pilot is we used a whole bunch of drone footage of about 20 kilometers of their network, and then we used our cognitive services to do image and analytics on top of that. Now, as you can imagine, with the Microsoft Vision Analytics, you can upload a photo and it can tell you what's in the photo. There's people, there's a table, and so on. But it doesn't go down to the level of detail that you see on this picture here. It will not identify the specific pins that is relevant to this customer. It won't identify the specific brackets and the wires and so on. So what they did is they used our custom vision API and built their own image analytics or vision analytics API on top of it. So effectively, it was a custom analysis tool that would then parse the image and come up with the various different pointers on top of it. This was done, and they built the minimum viable product in 4 days. So it is not a very highly complex process to go through, but you can develop your own custom analytics solutions vision analytics solution on top of our APIs using these capabilities. And as a result of that, they now take drone footage from their entire network, they feed it through the API, through the solution, which then analyzes it over time and then makes recommendations as to parts that might need to be reordered, or highlights to a human that certain aspects might need to be looked at, or certain parts of the network might need to have a human to go out and have a look at the trees and the plants around it. And the third example I wanted to use, and this was very specifically around indigenous languages, is a scenario that we implemented. But I can see how else it could be used. As part of the Microsoft translation capabilities, we have this capability called a Translator Hub, which allows you to build a translation system for your own language, and in this case, obviously, we developed it for the native and endangered languages. So we looked at the Indigenous Council and how we could use it to preserve a whole bunch of the Aboriginal languages forever. But you can create your own translation packs, and you can create your own language identification solution. You can use it to conserve and preserve existing dialects for future generations, but if there is a particular language translation that is currently not available, or there's a certain dialect that you need to implement, our platform allows you the capability to customize it and build it and implement it yourself. So this is more of to think of the solution or the cognitive services, especially from a speech perspective, to not be the be-all and end-all of what's available right now, but how it can be extended out and be customized as required. The final part I wanted to just touch on is around bots, and I think the bots are important because they provide the human interaction to the AI engine and to a lot of the machine learning and the smarts that go on in the back end. Thing to remember with bots is we've developed a framework, which means once you've developed your bot, you can enable it through a whole bunch of different channels, be it Facebook Messenger, Teams, and Skype, and so on. So the first example I wanted to share with you is with the University of Canberra, who has actually implemented two bots. One's student-focused, which is called Lucy, and the other one's staff-focused, which is called Bruce. And in case you're wondering where the names have come from, both the names have the letters UC in them, which is short for University of Canberra. Now, the student bot basically answers a whole bunch of the standard questions that students have. What time's the library open? Is there parking available at this location, and so on. How can I reset my password, etc., etc. But what it also allows them to do is, if the bot can't answer the question, it can actually log a job in Dynamics and then give a ticket number to the student for them to be able to follow on. Similarly, the staff bot is integrated through their intranet as well as through Microsoft Teams. So it just appears as another attendee in their channel, so they can ask it questions and get further information. A couple of interesting points there. The staff bot has had over 4,000 queries in the first couple of months. So when I talk to customers, a lot of them always feel this challenge that their organization might not be ready for new technology, might not be ready for AI, might not be ready to use some of these capabilities within the platform. There's a great example of an academic organization who has been able to absorb this and obviously seeing a lot of value out of it. What they found is almost 87% of the questions in the first couple of months across both Lucy and Bruce have been successfully answered by the bot, which obviously reduces great load on the customer service team. And one of the other things is, as you can see in the bottom there, we also provide the ability to parse the content and to understand the intent of the conversation. And so if there is the potential of somebody asking questions that might imply that they're depressed, they're unhappy, you can actually trigger a whole bunch of different activities through the channel as well. And then finally, the final use case that I wanted to share is another government department, which is the Department of Human Services, which implemented a bot almost 18 months ago internally called Roxy. And the idea behind Roxy was to allow them to answer questions very easily internally. So, sorry, is there somebody there? It's a group chat bot where people in the field can ask questions of it, and then if the bot knows the answer, it responds immediately. If not, it waits for one of the subject matter experts to respond, and then it learns from that interaction and it gets better over time. They initially rolled this out for the student direct system, and they found that the processing time for forms once the bot was implemented reduced from about 40 minutes to under 15 minutes. So great improvement in time to value internally by the use of something like bots. There have been a few questions around where these case studies can be made available. I will share links as a post this session. They're all available on the Microsoft Customers website, and especially the Australian use cases are all available there as well. So look, that was just a snapshot of some use cases and some scenarios. As you can see, a lot of our customers here in Australia and New Zealand are already using these tools and technologies, and in a report I read from Forrester, there's pretty much customers across all industries who are now currently leveraging AI to improve their offerings to their customers and to improve business processes. So I think our challenge as Microsoft and our partner community is to help all of our customers take advantage of these capabilities, because if customers aren't leveraging these tools that are available, they're going to fall further behind in their marketplace, because their competitors definitely are already using these. So with that, I'll hand back to Glenn, who will run you through the rest of the session. Glenn, over to you.
Thank you very much. I've just taken over as presenter, so from a visual point of view, for everyone on the call, you may see a little blurriness for a moment as things switch context to me. But yeah, thanks very much, Ronnie. That's really kind of you. One of the things that I obviously want to emphasize is, based on what Ronnie's just said, what we're seeing from an AI perspective is really this idea of solution. The idea that we go from a particular process and we improve it. I think one of the things that you'll notice is that there's continuous improvement. We seldom see situations. Now, I say that we seldom see situations. It is possible to get it wrong, but we seldom see situations where it is properly implemented, where the customer goes backward, or for that matter, the partner goes backwards. So it's important that we kind of understand that there are benefits. We are providing solutions. The solutions will make things better. There will be performance and things like that. And this is the kind of messaging that we need to emphasize as we sort of go to customers and start telling them about what's being offered. And that becomes part of the whole making it real piece. Okay, getting customers to understand how AI can help them, how it can enable their business. And ultimately, when we start to do that, we look at three core scenarios that customers are generally using today. And these tend to be I wouldn't say the easiest way to implement AI, but they seem to be the most intuitive ways to implement AI. And that, firstly, it's using digital agents. So the conversational or the digital agent is a really good way to get into the AI space for a lot of customers, even if it's just, as I will show you guys a little bit later, plugging the agent into a Facebook environment, rather than thinking, I know everybody tends to think immediately, oh, we're going to have to redo the website, or we're going to do this, or we're going to have to add a little bit, and ultimately it starts to be about cost, and ultimately it starts to be about lots of little decisions that have to be made. But if we look at it and we sort of say, okay, well, is this something that you're currently doing? And if it is something that you're currently doing, what are you doing about people who contact you through Facebook? What are you doing about people who contact you through Twitter? What actually happens when somebody fills in the form on the website? And this is how we should be looking at it. It's a case of usually there's someone physically responding. What we're trying to do is get away from the physical responding piece and get that person who sits and spends hours every morning answering emails or replying to potential leads and things like that, get that person being a little more useful and get some automation in place. And this is what digital agents give us to do, give us the ability to do. Intelligent apps, okay, this ultimately is the fact that a lot of what's out there, especially within the Microsoft stack, has intelligence already built in. And then it becomes a case of messaging that and building upon that. Right. The numbers are up in the sort of 3/4 of apps being infused with artificial intelligence by 2018. Okay. And this generally becomes then about transforming core business processes with AI. Okay. We're getting into a cycle where pretty much every process within every company across almost every industry will need to get smarter and will likely be infused with AI, become more agile, go to market faster, become more predictive as we move forward. So just breaking these guys down a little bit, starting initially with digital agents. And you can see that the predictions or the numbers that come out of the various research companies indicate that most of our customer interactions will happen with bots, within the next 7 years. And that will be engaging customers, engaging employees, much as Ronnie has just described in some of his examples. If we take it one step further and then we move to intelligent apps, once again, we're looking at about 3/4 of intelligence apps. Okay. 50% of them will include some form of AI. So really what we're seeing is this infusion of AI. And ultimately, customers are looking up. And what we as partners have to do is to start to look at how we can be the person that the customer looks at when they do look up, right? So in terms of transforming business process, this is where it really becomes important. And this is where it really becomes something that you're able to take to your customer. Now, whether it's manufacturing, retail, financial services, risk analytics, dynamic pricing, predictive maintenance, Ronnie's alluded to a few of these. It is important that we start working the shift around your developers, around enterprises, and around the way we create business apps of the future. Okay, these are big numbers. We're talking 90%, 75%, 80%. Given what we have now, it's a clear indication that the market itself is going to be huge, and we have to be part of that market. So it becomes a case of businesses needing to be intelligent businesses. I made statements around the fact that if we don't help business to become intelligent business, and if we don't get on the road to intelligent businesses ourselves, we will struggle to exist going forward. And in many cases, many businesses will cease to exist as a result. So it becomes a case of how do I apply this to myself? And then how do I take this to my customers? And there is also the important question, and that is the what's in it for me question. Excuse me, I just knocked my own microphone out of my off my head. So we know that most companies are not ready for AI. Okay, in spite of all the hype and excitement in the AI field, most companies do not have any planning in place. They don't have the infrastructure or the cloud capability to benefit from basic data science, let alone artificial intelligence and machine learning. Okay. So one of the things that we have to be very cautious about is the temptation to plunge into things with customers. Okay. How do we get them to look to their strengths? And then how do we get them to take their strengths and start applying some sort of artificial intelligence twist? Okay. We need to talk to them about potentially making certain applications work smarter, or taking better advantage of their data, or how can they improve upon past performance. Right. We don't need to build things that the market doesn't comprehend. We need to build things that helps the market improve. I know that because of all this hype, we tend to think, AI means autonomous cars, and AI means putting a man on Mars. It's not that. It's about looking at our customers, and most of us already have relationships with customers. I certainly know from my perspective, there isn't a customer that I talk to that isn't interested in using AI. I do know that their interest wanes when they go looking for solutions, when they start realizing when they start thinking pricing and investment, body of work, how they get help. There's also the dilemma that many companies will face, and that's the build or buy. So as they explore the power of AI, it's an undertaking that we have to take to essentially go to the partner and start saying, we understand that this is the position you're in if you want to improve your business. If that improvement includes machine learning, data science, AI, or anything under that particular umbrella, we understand that you're in this sort of strange place where you have to think through building, do you buy? And ultimately, we start to come up with a solution that helps them to make those kind of decisions. So one of the things that we have to look at, and I put this in there only because it's one of the things that we have to be aware of. AI equals computing, or computing equals AI. So this goes to the businesses being intelligent businesses. Excuse me, I went a slide ahead in error. Whoops, that's better. And in this case, once we look at the Microsoft stack, we also have to realize that AI is already permeating, is already integrated into the Microsoft stack. Okay. There are specific solutions that have been built out for enterprise functions. There's specific solutions for customer service tailored to fit unique business needs. And Microsoft are working with the HPs, Macy's, in order to better produce outcomes, not only for customers, but obviously for these particular customers as well, not for customers in general, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so you'll start to see that HP are already using AI to handle most of their customer cases. Okay, Macy's have 25% fewer human escalations. So what they're essentially doing is using existing services to make determinations that allow them to ultimately escalate fewer tickets or handle more cases automatically. Then if we look at some of the other Microsoft pieces, we already know that AI is infused into most of the Microsoft stack, most of the applications. When we are using Word, excuse me, I've done the same thing again. When we are using Word, I think it's potentially I need some AI here. When we're using Word, there's a whole heap going on in the background that allows us to ultimately make sure that we're spelling correctly, etc., etc. So it's important that we start to discover what is happening in the products that customers are using. And as part of that discovery, take the idea of what we're trying to do to them and say to them, in many cases, you're already using this. There are certain capabilities that you're already using that we could potentially move to other parts of your business. And it's a way in, it's the beginning of a conversation, and importantly, then it allows us to move to the next steps in the conversation, right? So we know it's doing a whole lot of things, some of them very advanced, and in other cases, not so much. It's used pretty much all the time in most of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so if you are using some sort of spam detection mechanism, you're using AI. And this is an important conversation to have with customers, right? Because one of the things I think that becomes a differentiator and gets them away from that thinking that AI is autonomous cars and AI is putting man on Mars, it's the simple things. AI is already infused to whatever you're using for spam detection. Okay, AI is used for personalization. You know, Netflix is recommending things all the time. It's used in advertising, okay, security, logistics, banking, marketing, shipping, dating, even. So this isn't something that is a million miles away. This is something that is on the customer's doorstep. In fact, in many cases, it's inside the building. We then have to look at how we can use it to improve some of their processes and do other things with it. So then we need to start making it real. And I understand that this gets you to the sort of what's in it for me place. Because if we are going to build, if we are going to invest, if we are going to essentially take it to customers and start saying we should do this or you should do that, then we have to have a mechanism in place that ultimately has some sort of benefit for us as well. Now, a lot of what you probably saw or probably noticed while Ronnie was speaking is that many of the solutions that are being used use a combination of things. In one case, something that the company had written themselves with a cognitive service, so with one of the APIs. So 2 or 3 pieces that are strung together in order to try and provide some sort of solution. This is one of the ways that makes it more attractive to the customer. Now, remember that you already have relationships with customers. You are in a position where the customer is usually aware that AI is permeating everything. You're having the conversation with them. So given that you have a particular type of customers usually, and I like to use the CRM. I spend a lot of time playing in the CRM space. I like to use the CRM analogy because in one case where we've put it into play or where we've got it running, we used the sentiment analysis capability, and what we're doing is we're taking anything that is pushed into this particular company's support form, we're analyzing it, and then we're creating tickets, okay, within the service module based on the sentiment of the request. Ultimately, this means that obviously somebody who is angry gets dealt with by a particular person and potentially before the person that is happy, which is not necessarily saying that happy is a bad thing. It's simply saying that from this particular customer's perspective, they would like to know when people are unhappy and therefore make them happy. People that are happy will take it and we'll get back to them and say thank you. But really what we're trying to do is ultimately analyze the sentiment and react. Put rules in place, create tickets. The tickets allow the particular request to go to the right people and then are dealt with. So this allows us then to essentially go, well, here's something. And when I say us, I mean me and the couple of guys that I work with. Here's something that I can take from customer 1 and apply to customer 2. So we've done that. We've had to tweak it a little bit, but we've done it. So what we're really doing is saying, where's the form? We'll run it through the service. We will then push it back into your system to the appropriate place, and you pay us a fee. So we've kind of used that idea of create and rent. Ultimately, I've now created this little bubble. Data comes in one side, and I push data out the other side, and you pay a fee for it. Obviously, there's the ability to go to the customer and say, look, you may need to build, right? I understand what you're doing. I understand what you're trying to achieve. I understand that you'd like your developers to eventually look after it. So we may just have to build it. We may just have to build it together, and you go on to maintain it. I might host it for you, though, or I might maintain it and you can host it. We also have to think about the support piece. So ultimately, as we take this to customers, it's about essentially trying to wrap some IT into the little bubble and then make a decision on what you're going to do with that little bubble. Do you keep it and let the customer use it, as in rent it? Do you go and build another version for your customer? Or do you allow your customer to essentially, buy it from you as an executable? Do you host it for your customer? Maintain it for your customers, support it for your customers. So we have to look at all the angles on making it real. Right? It cannot just be a case of, we walk in, we do something, we walk out. I do understand that there's a profitability piece that is attached to this that we have to think through, right? So it's about your strategy. It's about what you plan to do in terms of the AI world. So moving a little bit further forward, I wanted to introduce you guys to Flow, because I think the important thing about this is, as we talk about, do we host, do we build and sell one side and keep the other side? Do we sell the whole thing? Do we rent it? It's really about ecosystem, and it's really about some sort of journey that you take with the customer, right? We all know Progressive Insurance. We all see it on TV. Now, the piece that I'm referencing here is the American part, but we have a lady who does the same thing in the context of Australia. And the adverts are very much the same. Obviously, given that we have slightly different markets, there's a slightly different take on the way they present it. Okay, so given that this lady is one of the best-known commercial spokespersons, what they did is they actually had someone approach them and say, you know what we should do? Now, this was all part of branding and marketing. There was a whole lot of pieces involved, and in a couple of cases, yeah, I know a couple of people who were actually on this particular campaign. They created a Facebook environment for her. Now, you're probably saying, oh, well, every company is going to create a Facebook environment. Well, in this case, her particular Facebook page. So this is not the Progressive Facebook page. This is Flo, this young lady. She has 5 million followers. Okay. Now, she's obviously appearing in all the ads, so she's well known and things like that. Okay. What they did then was create the Facebook page for her. Once she got to a certain amount of followers, they thought, instead of people interacting with her as in filling in a question or asking something and then a human climbing in and actually answering the question, they created a chatbot. Okay, so they created something called the Flow chatbot, and they plugged it into Facebook. So now you can actually ask Flow for information live. Okay. So this has become an important channel. So they've turned it into this conversation bot where you can ask her questions about insurance, different types of insurance and that kind of stuff. And then once again, as Ronnie was alluding to a little bit earlier, certain questions that obviously can't be answered are immediately passed on to another chat environment where one of their live chat people gets involved. And Flow just goes, I'm sorry, I don't really know the answer to that, but let me ask my expert kind of thing. So it's really about this ecosystem that they've created around this idea of a character Facebook chatbot. Okay. And yeah, they've just used Microsoft tools. Okay. Ensuring that they get the constant improvements, the customer experience. Okay. And obviously all the advantages. Right. And as the chatbot grows, they've slowly started to add further things, further pieces to the way that Flow interacts. Okay, so ultimately, it's allowed them to continue their journey of digital innovation. They've got a couple of partners in. They've obviously got marketing in. They've got some branding in, and they've come up with Flow. They've come up with a very progressive, for lack of a better word, advertising campaign. And as a result, Flow's become ultimately this little celebrity on her own who now has her own Facebook page, her own chatbot, right? And ultimately, if you start to think of it, speed, agility that has been added. Who are you using Flow to date? Marnie, I'm not sure if I understand that question. Okay. As they say, in the first 4 months, they've seen updating the models at least 75 times, okay, by using the Microsoft tools. So what this leads to on another level, guys, is that because of the nature of these tools, it's once you implement, once you deploy, once you get a customer involved, there's this constant updating that needs to happen. It is a journey. There is no, we put it in, leave it alone and walk away. The same happens with machine learning. The models are constantly changing. The models, I say changing, improving. And our job is to keep them improving, keep them learning, keep them evaluating, making sure that our predictions are within an accepted margin from a customer's perspective. And when they aren't, improving them. So we have this opportunity to be constantly engaged. Okay. We also have to think about the different granularities, right? So skills, and how, if we don't have the skills, how do we upskill? So we've talked to that in sessions before. I also talked about the importance of data. Okay. All of this is based on data. The reality here is there isn't too much you can do if you don't have the data. So it's an important component, and it's an important piece to take to your customers. You know, the layering. Okay, so as Ronnie alluded to, the business to sort of string together a bunch of different solutions or create the machine learning solution, and you guys as partners own it, and then give them the capability, say through Excel, so that from a customer perspective, it looks like the customer owns it, whereas they're really just paying you for the service and using it on-prem or using it in a manner that makes it appear that the customer owns it. And then having a strategy, right? It's important that AI infuses your strategy, the customer strategy, rather than becomes the strategy, okay? Understand what AI is good at. Understand how it fits your business. Understand how it can improve your processes. Then start to establish a starting point and start small. By start small, I mean really just find that process, find that piece of the business that you believe can improve. So my way in, for lack of a better word, has been the CRM conversation with a couple of customers. The ability to give people sentiment analysis and say, you know, watch a Twitter feed and say to someone, at the moment, nobody thinks much of your company, is an amazing thing for a customer, right? If it's not something they're currently doing, then when you show a customer what the general feeling is out there about a particular product or something like that, it's usually something that is amazing to see when the customer actually acknowledges the fact that they need to do something about it. Okay, and then also use reactive use cases. Right, so analyze and visualize historical data. And by visualize, I mean the Power BIs and things like that. Show them what is happening, and then do some statistical analysis on what has happened and how it could potentially be improved going forward. Okay, and importantly, poll, query, survey the business. So talk not only to the people that we generally talk to as partners, but put out surveys. If they have an interest in artificial intelligence, then simply put out a survey to the rest of the business. We did that with a business in Brisbane, where we said to all the people who work for the business, we're going to give you a little survey. And the survey was, you know, what do they think are the obstacles? What bugs them? What processes take too long? Which processes could do with improvement? And then once we had a list of 10 or 20 processes, we sat down with the executives and we said to them, this seems to be the bugbears. These seem to be the blockers. And we went through a process of, which is still ongoing, slowly trying to improve. It hasn't all been a case of just infuse AI. but in a couple of cases, we've been able to use some of the AI tools and capabilities. And everybody at this stage is very, very happy, and now looking at how we can further improve some of the processes that have already been improved. So for me, it's been a win-win in terms of integrating, infusing, stitching AI, not only into the things that I do, but into the things that some of my customers do. Okay. There has to be a place to start. And one of those places to start is the solution gallery. So I urge anybody who's interested in AI and anybody who thinks they can start to take AI to customers to go through the solution gallery. It's not only about solutions, it's also about the fact that it gives you the notion of, oh, wow, we can do that, or, oh, so-and-so would benefit from this, which is a very important component in the conversation with customers. Just as the storytelling that Ronnie spoke to, and some of the pieces that I'm speaking to around under their data understanding, so their data literacy, understanding AI in general, right? Making AI part of the strategy and not the strategy becoming AI, things like that. Okay. So guys, that's me done. We've got sort of 8 minutes or so. If anybody has any questions before we can jump off the call, just remember going forward. So when I say going forward, going into next week, that next week becomes a opportunity to solidify all the pieces that we've discussed over time. So anything that you want to review, anything you want to look at again, anybody, a colleague or a friend that you potentially know that you want to refer, to a further 8-week challenge. And then importantly as well, we're not going anywhere. So we have the Yammer community forum. So please, if there are any questions, if anybody really just wants a little more advice, a little more guidance on how we can get you started, how we can get you moving, please reach out. I'm fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with a few customers, and I'm very happy to sort of share what I've learned, or certainly try and give you the capability or some guidance in terms of moving forward in the AI space. So if there are any questions, please put them in the chat window and we'll do our best to answer them. And have a review of everything we've done thus far, and we'll go forward from there.
Glenn, we had a question earlier from Nick in regards to what is the range of costs to implement a small AI project and get some benefits?
For Nick, that's really open-ended, but in general, if you're looking at something along the lines of what I discussed in terms of the CRM system, where we are essentially now creating tickets based on the sentiment of the request. So ultimately, there's a couple of pieces involved here. We do have, the company does have a couple of products. So we have a system where they fill in, obviously, the form when they're interested in a particular product. Now that at this stage isn't infused with any AI, so that is just standard. It's all hosted up on Azure, so we're paying the price of a web app at this stage for that particular piece. In the second, we're using sentiment analysis, so we're paying from my perspective, we're paying to use the that particular service, and adding AI to grow the most. Excuse me, I'm just reading what Nick's written. Okay, so Nick, I think I'm getting what you're trying to get at. It comes down to ultimately, if you're going to use, for instance, we're using sentiment analysis. So we're using a particular service and we're paying a particular fee for that service. And then on top, what we do is we have a little engine that does the workflow piece for us. So ultimately, we chose to use the sentiment analysis service, and we chose to essentially have a little integration piece that sends the request to the correct queue. Now, what I've done is essentially wrap that as a little bit of as a service. So I'm taking essentially the price of the hosting, the app service, the price of the analytics, the sentiment analysis service, and I've obviously that equals an amount, and then we've put a little bit of a margin on top of that amount, and the customer pays, the amount plus the margin. Now, that's the way we've tended to do it for this particular customer. As we've now moved it to a second customer that is using one component in the service, we've kind of got into this weird place where the pricing models become kind of weird. So it's one of those things where you have to look at the price, go and look at the prices of the various services. So for instance, you have an ISV solution for an NDIS sector, and you want to add AI to provide the most suitable program for the disabled. So you're going to do sort of, analyze incoming requests and then divert them to the correct program. Okay. In that case, it's really from your perspective then the price of the service. So once you've ultimately determined which of the services you're going to use, it will become about pushing the data into that service and then receiving an answer from the service, which will then give you the insight as to which program it gets diverted into. So in many cases, for instance, if I was to break down the text analytics piece, this really could have been, the sentiment analytics, this could have really just been a case of me, how can I put this, pushing the answer directly into CRM and then letting CRM essentially workflow based on a value. Say, for instance, I get, if I was to go with regard to sentiment, angry customer, moderate customer, happy customer. And I made happy 1, moderate 2, and angry 3. I could have really got the service to just deliver 1, 2, or 3. And then as a result, CRM could make the determination, you could add a workflow in CRM that simply says if it equals 1, send it to this queue. If it equals 2, send it to another queue, and so on. Right. So there's that component. And I think that's probably what you'll do. You'll essentially use a service. The service will spit out a value, A, B, or C. A will be program 1, B will be program 2, and C will be program 3. I guess initially for you, it's finding the correct service and then making a determination if that's enough. Because in many cases, if I'm obviously guessing here, but it probably looks like you're responding to a query and then obviously trying to get some text analysis out of that query, and then based on the text analysis, maybe coming up with a suitable program. So there might be an extra step involved there, I think, in your case. I'm just guessing, but feel free to go on to Yammer, and we can certainly explore this a little bit deeper, because I don't want to keep everyone listening to us have a conversation. But yeah, reach out to me on Yammer, and we can certainly look at it a little bit deeper in terms of the proper service and things like that. Okay, well, Mani, I think if we're done with questions, it's just gone 4 o'clock, and we can let everybody go off and have a weekend. Hold on, John's typing. Let's just see if it's another question quickly. Also remember, guys, that Yammer, so if you do have any further questions and things like that, please reach out in Yammer, and we can answer them there and certainly try and help you as much as we can. Other than that, thank you very much. Mani?
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.